I've been going to these sales conferences since I started my career. And basically, at every one you go to, somewhere there will be a slide that says sales reps actually only spend 30% of their time selling, well, whatever it is. And it's been the same slide since I've been going to these conferences. Maybe you've experienced the same. So clearly, nothing is changing there. And maybe it's just because we don't care as an industry. But if you're saying that that is true, and yet you're still expecting them to be organizing their approach to the market on their own, if you're not doing this territory design, right, you're expecting each sales rep to not only be a seller and a deliverer, as you mentioned, but also a sourcer, going and doing the analysis to say, where should I go and why? To me, you are ignoring that statistic if it's something that you care about.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Kevin Davis, thanks so much for joining me today on RevOps Champions.
Brendon, thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Kevin, so you've got an incredible background, both with your time at NetSuite as well as Google, and now you're running BoogieBoard. What sparked your passion for starting BoogieBoard?
Yeah, I was in sales for most of my career. I was a salesperson at NetSuite and then at Google Cloud, as you mentioned. I joined the dark side and became an operator while at Google Cloud. And throughout all of this, I've been looking to start a business, and they always tell you to look for problems that you might be able to solve. And a problem that was very close to me throughout all of it was territory design, territory planning. I experienced that as a sales rep. I was the person probably complaining about my territory every now and then. And then when I got under the hood of the car and was responsible for actually needing to deliver and make these things, I realized how hard it was, how limited the tooling was. And the initial premise of our company was, what if we could build a suggestion engine that could help companies to design territories with a little more data backing? And that was the start. That was a couple of years ago. And we've since grown a bit bigger in our product scope. But at the core, that's still what we are, is a suggestion engine to help companies design better territories.
Very, very cool. I'm sure a lot of people listening you've suddenly piqued their interest in, because this is a very common challenge, that we also see from how we set up CRM for especially sort of mid-market companies, where as they're growing, the complexity and the need for organization here is so critical, right? So if you want to get a little more granular right now, what are the biggest challenges you're seeing in the industry right now for RevOps and or revenue and sales leaders as far as territory design?
Yeah, there's two big ones that we see. One is that there's been this explosion of market data. Every company now has access to incredible market data, very precise market data, new ways to manipulate that market data. And it's not manifesting into thoughtfully designed precise territories. They're trying to, but it's just a really tough thing to do right now. And so there's kind of a lack of ROI on that. That's part one. And then part two is it's just a very bad vibes process. It is multi-stakeholders. The sales leaders don't like it, who are the customers of the process. Same with the sales reps. The operators hate doing it. And that's largely derivative of the fact that it happens in spreadsheets and is actually a very difficult quantitative problem.
Kevin, do you see differences? Because you have a very strong background in very large SaaS companies. Now you're likely working with, smaller. So when I say smaller, more likely mid-market companies who have the challenge of territory design. Do you see any differences across industries, or is territory design a challenge in pretty much all industries that you've seen?
I've seen it as a challenge across industries, but differently so in the variables that are in play. If you think about a company that's selling heavy machinery, and their reps are out in the field selling, like they might need to be optimizing for drive time. They might need to be optimizing for having physical in-person conversations, whereas a SaaS company might be trying to optimize for technographic data and trying to sell to customers with similar technical footprint. Yeah. I always talk about a territory is often a way that you're trying to describe the community of your customers. And so most companies and industries have that consistency, but the way that they have to deploy it and the data that they have to use are often very different.
And I'm guessing because of the scale that in your experience, when you're talking about territory design, you're talking about beyond, for example, just North America. You're talking about global territory design.
Yeah, I'm talking about grouping regional accounts in EMEA, APAC, wherever the business has a sales presence. There's a need to group accounts and have a plan in place for how you're going to attack the market.
And I guess as a quick side note, do you believe that AI is going to have a positive impact on how this is done going forward?
Yeah, I've already seen it. I think it has a massive positive impact in the way that we retrieve market data, the way that we organize that market data, so we can be a lot more specific and precise to our customers. And then what we do is use a lot of that to actually help divvy up the accounts and create the actual territories. And then there's just the consumption of a process. Things can be done in a lot more of a natural language sense, and we can remove sort of the spreadsheet experience. So I think there's a three-pronged approach to how AI is already changing the game for this.
Yeah, it seems to be. I guess the reason I was asking is because all the other challenges or problems, whether they're sort of industry wide or specific to certain companies, I haven't come across any yet where there doesn't seem to be a solution that AI can at least help with or accelerate. Just switching back to, as you got started at BoogieBoard, you interviewed dozens of RevOps leaders. What patterns emerged, and how did those real world insights shape your product essentially at BoogieBoard?
That's a great question. I think when we were interviewing, we interviewed hundreds of people, and we still do, and we got met with like immense frustration around a multitude of things. But the one that we kept coming back to was that they were trying to provide this delightful process to their sales leaders, to their sales reps, to their internal customers, and they just weren't able to do it. And so to me, it really shined a light on the sales to RevOps to sales ops, whoever it was, relationship, and what the dynamic was there. And so we would propose to fix this a lot of times through RevOps. But we also learned through that process that RevOps could identify the problem almost always. They could speak to what they might want a solution to do. They often weren't empowered to go and fix it themselves. They may not have had the budget. They may not have had the tooling, and they rarely ever had the time. And so I felt for RevOps because they knew what was going on, but they hadn't been vaulted into a strategic seat at the table. They'd had to do the strategic work, but they weren't always being given kind of the ability to solve the problem.
I'm just thinking through, the different industries and stuff where we work. So, and the three main industries that we are focused on are manufacturing, AEC, and franchises. And I think in this particular case, franchises is probably less of a focus for, even though territories are a real thing in franchises, it doesn't impact directly because it's not a sales rep network, correct?
Right.
But as I think about manufacturing and then the AEC, so architecture, engineering, and construction firms, and let's focus on the AEC now, which are essentially professional services industry.
Yeah.
They often are in this seller-doer model, right? So they don't necessarily have huge sales teams, but they have we have a couple of clients where they have 1,000 employees, and potentially 700 or 800 of them are both selling the work and providing the service as an engineer or an architect or designer. Do you see any application for what you're doing currently in that sort of seller-doer model?
I do. I love that seller-doer model, by the way. I think we often,
okay,
in the software world, I think we place some restrictions on salespeople, and they tend to sit in a box. And I think sometimes we need to unleash them to be more of doers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think of those as a resource utilization problem. And right, so if I've got seller-doers, they're delivering for existing customers, they're sourcing new customers. They're very important to my customer experience and my bottom line. And so if they're spending time on the wrong accounts, if they're having to go and organize their day in a way that is chewing into the time that they could be utilized as a resource, yeah, absolutely. We think about a territory as their orientation to their accounts. And so I personally, of course, I'm heavily biased, find it, very important to figure out who gets what account.
Sure. one of the challenges, for example, in the AEC space, which is very similar in a lot of other professional services businesses or industries, is every leader in those types of businesses will tell you it's all about the client relationship. Mm. But what they haven't figured out yet, and they all know that if they can figure this out, is that it's the difference between scale and profitability and not. Because they're, to your point, they're over indexing. So they're spreading their energy and resources equally across all clients or prospective clients. They don't have ways, sort of data driven ways, to focus on the clients or prospective clients who are going to drive the most business or LTV, lifetime value as a metric in the future, which seems to be a real challenge because they are so relationship focused and they're really good at relationships, but it actually is a detriment to the growth of their business. So I like the way you talked about the fact that they are so key. First of all, they love what they do, right? It's a very, very interesting space. Like the engineer, a lot of engineers will tell me, they would do what they do for free if someone just paid their mortgage and their kids' tuition, So I agree with you that the seller-doer model is a really interesting one, but of course it just means that you're expecting more from these very highly qualified professional people, and the question is, how do you help them be more effective as an entire company? Let's say it's a 1,000-person company. If everybody does a little bit, you can imagine what that might do if they had more structure from I guess in this case, a territory design perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because you have architecture firms, you're talking engineers, and when I think of those professions, I think about this point where science and rigidity kind of elevates into art.
Right.
And if I'm thinking about the structures and the buildings that I love, they're very tightly designed, very thoughtfully designed, but you don't see that. It manifests in something that's a bit more beautiful and a bit more fluid. And forgive me, I get annoying about territory design and waxing these pros, but I find that similar kind of spirit needs to exist in that process, whereby, okay, we have this market data, right? And we've got to organize our sales reps. And so it's tempting to bring in this major rigidity or do the opposite and say we need to have just customer focus. And so it's completely fluid, when really it's a false dichotomy. You need to focus on the science to elevate it into an artful experience for your clients.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I love that. Moving to manufacturing, you mentioned heavy equipment, and then we also have some clients that sort of cross over both, so industrial HVAC companies that again are also territorial, but the territories are typically broken up by the manufacturer of the air conditioning or whatever the product might be. So they control the territory that way from a manufacturing perspective. And I guess that's a similar model to franchises, where essentially the distributor that has the exclusive territory, they do the sales, so that the brand owner of the actual product, that is not their responsibility. So they might not need it. I guess that's the question. In that case, would that brand of, let's say, an industrial air conditioning system, would they then not need to be too concerned about territory design, or is that already built into their distribution model?
It's probably built into their distribution model. I think it's probably something that they're paying the distribution fee for, right? Is these folks have already decided how to attack the market. And so they've created groupings, they've created processes around those groupings to say, hey, how can we scale this and make sure customers are served in the right way? But yeah, the company that is then going through the distributor, they wouldn't be someone who would probably need to sit and say, all right, how do we need to segment the market so that we can sell? I think that's what they're using the distributor for in that one.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, so Kevin, let's get back to your sort of day-to-day. When companies are making the mistakes that are so common in territory design, or the lack of territory design, how is that showing up for those companies? I'm guessing, churn is probably one way, but what are the ways that the problem essentially manifests?
Yeah. Sales rep retention is one that I actually think is a really big deal. If you've ever been in sales, you receive a territory, You quickly start comparing notes with everyone around you. And of course, your territory is the worst. You've got the most uphill battle. But if that feeling manifests inside of multiple people on your sales team, it could be a major trust erosion. Down the line, you have resource cost on designing these territories that can take a long time for a process that is ultimately unsatisfactory. And then the big one is like you said, if you are incorrectly or suboptimally oriented into the market and you're not putting the right people on the right accounts, you can have customer churn, you can have opportunity cost and wasted time from your sellers.
Yeah. So opportunity cost is a very, I'd love to unpack that a little bit more, because we see it all the time. Also when a company comes to us to help them essentially, either transform or just set up a CRM for them for the first time, the sort of total cost of opportunity is not something they're typically coming to the table with. And we essentially have to walk them through the fact that a CRM, I mean, this is sort of for the least sophisticated, it's like, we just need to pay X $1,000 per month for the software. And then, like, what are the other costs? It's like, well, let us share with you what the other costs are. And then, of course, you also need to flip that around. Is like, well, what is the total opportunity cost?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, what happens if you don't do this the right way? Which, of course, is the same frustration that you have when you see, bad or the lack of territory design. That's the same frustration that we have, because we've made that mistake ourselves when we just went and bought, a software that we thought was going to fix all our problems. And then, of course, in reality, it's going to do is accelerate. If anything, it's going to accelerate the problems you have if you haven't first mapped out what you need the software to do. So how do you explain opportunity cost in your space?
Yeah, I'll start with an example that I think is really simple. I've been going to these sales conferences since I started my career, and basically at every one you go to, somewhere there will be a slide that says sales reps actually only spend 30% of their time selling, well, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's been the same slide since I've been going to these conferences. Maybe you've experienced the same. So clearly nothing is changing there. And maybe it's just because we don't care as an industry. But if you're saying that is true, and yet you're still expecting them to be organizing their approach to the market on their own, if you're not doing this territory design, right, you're expecting each sales rep to not only be a seller and a deliverer, as you mentioned, but also a sourcer, going and doing the analysis to say, where should I go and why? To me, you are ignoring that statistic if it's something that you care about.
Mm-hmm.
And so the easiest opportunity cost we think about is, all right, if I can be a little more prescriptive, if I can use the data and be a little more prescriptive about where my reps should go, what would that unlock from them from a resource utilization standpoint?
Yeah. And again, I completely agree with you. I think anyone who's been responsible for sales or somehow trying to help companies be more efficient in their sales team or departments, we've all seen that slide at multiple conferences where whatever the low percentages of your reps spending their days selling, is it 30% or 3 hours a day, and what are they doing for the other 5 hours and all that kind of stuff. I totally agree. And I guess what you're saying is, and we heard the same thing also with, in fact, I heard this just yesterday again, how someone was comparing their sort of custom approach to CRM for a specific industry. And they were saying, yeah, but because I can bet your customers only use about 30% of what HubSpot can do. And I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, that's probably true. I mean, it might range between 30 and 60% or whatever, because the software is built to try and help many, many different types of businesses in all kinds of ways. And companies shouldn't feel bad if the software that they're paying for is that they're only using 30, 40, 50 or 60% of it, as long as they're getting done what they want to get done, right?
Yeah.
To me, there's a similarity there, and it's like, which obviously I think the software cost is a lot smaller than lines of 50 reps who are only 30% efficient. That's obviously a much bigger problem and a much bigger cost. But I think the solution to it is probably similar. I'm thinking, I'm just spitballing here, but I might be completely wrong. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I think I am wrong. But The strategic leadership question, though, is what do you need to do to have your reps spending more time doing the most valuable things, right?
Yeah. So just to be like acute with this example, one thing would be like, instead of them going online and trying to find accounts to sell to, you have one person or multiple people who are orchestrating that and those people are data hawks. They know how to use new systems, find great data, get rid of the bad data. And instead of the sales rep saying, all right, I've got access to all of Ohio, all of Kentucky, and I'll constantly just kind of be searching for accounts. You say, no, I know what exercise you're going to do when you're doing that, and we can do it better at scale. And so you're surfacing them the accounts on a cadence that makes sense for your business. Or if it's existing clients, doing that planning for them. These are our highest priority clients. This is what we expect to do with them and why. And so just moving up the starting line in the race that they're running, and trying to keep them, spending the time away from researching, planning, and actually being engaging with these clients.
Right. That's really good. I'm gonna switch gears quick. So because I want to make sure that we help folks understand also, where BoogieBoard fits in potentially into their tech stack, or I guess, do you think of it as a product or a service or a combination?
It's a software product that you subscribe to.
Yeah. Okay. Kevin, what are the most common, I guess, integrations? So if you think of I know there's no real ideal, right? Because depending on the industry, the company size, whatever CRM they use potentially, but what is like an example of a tech stack, and where BoogieBoard fits into that tech stack?
Yeah. So our biggest integrations are CRM. Most of our customers are Salesforce customers. We have some HubSpot customers as well. And then we're seeing a large emergence of Snowflake data being present in our world, or other customer data platforms.
Right.
If you think about wherever your main place is for storing customer and market data, so that's first-party data about my market, and it's third-party data about my market. That can be the industries of my customer base, how much money they spend, how big they are, what have you. BoogieBoard is going to suck in all of that information. That place probably also has your sales reps and how they're structured. We're going to suck that all in, and then allow you the ability to come into BoogieBoard and orchestrate it. BoogieBoard will let you run suggestions on it, put it through our algorithm, and get some territory design suggestions that will then manifest back in your CRM as a most likely scenario.
Okay. Does it happen in real time, or do you pull it into BoogieBoard, do the work, and then pull it back into the CRM?
Depends on the customer.
Okay.
So some companies will really heavily use BoogieBoard during big fiscal planning periods, so once or twice a year. And then during the other points of the year, it's more of a maintenance mode. Some companies with higher velocity sales models, where they're going through accounts more quickly, are doing it, on a monthly, a weekly even basis.
Okay. And the primary users of BoogieBoard would there be the sales or RevOps leaders?
It depends on the company size. It's someone in sales ops or RevOps that's doing the tactical work. So the person that would have been doing it in a spreadsheet now has access to BoogieBoard to do it.
Okay.
And then they invite the sales leaders and the sales reps in more as collaborators, so that they can see what's going on with territory design, make approvals, things of that nature, have a little more of a lighter touch experience.
Okay. But then once it's all sort of set for whatever the time frame is, whether it's a few weeks or a month or a quarter, did all those folks that, like they said the sellers primarily, whether they're reps or managers or leaders, they then go back to living in their CRM? Okay.
Yeah, and they never live in BoogieBoard fully. They come visit us, if you will, to try to say, okay, this is my territory, this is the feedback that they need. And then we click a button that says push to CRM. And the idea is now everything in CRM is delightful and better managed, and BoogieBoard wording is in there, so they know we're around. But yeah, their experience is still in CRM.
Right. Awesome. So again, a lot of our audience are run on EOS. Are you familiar with EOS?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, and whether it's EOS or scaling up or whatever, business model folks are familiar with, the commonality is that you're essentially running and planning your business 90 days at a time, right? And from our perspective, this seems to happen across all organizations, whether they're doing it deliberately or intentionally or not.
Yeah.
So let's just say, so every 90 days, when the sort of the leadership group gets together and focuses on what the priorities are for the next 90 days, obviously whoever represents sales at that meeting has a very, very strong say in what the priorities are in any industry. So the planning is now done. There's a plan for the next 90 days. Is that then typically when the team would go back, sort of the sales and or ops and RevOps folks would then get together and say, okay, here's the plan. What do we need to do to adjust territory design?
Yeah, you've got it. And so the planning piece is they'll be planning. They might be making different scenarios for what they could do during that period. That's a more RevOps or sales ops focused activity.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they push a plan live, so you'll push the actual orchestration of that plan in CRM, and BoogieBoard will be doing that orchestration for you. So the territory management that's actually happening in your CRM. And so there's this overlap of we're doing the orchestration piece, and then you're going to be planning, and then you're going to be planning, and then we'll do that orchestration. So it becomes cyclical.
Okay. Just coming back again to the challenges that you help your customers solve on a daily or weekly basis. Is there one thing that the RevOps or sales leaders that you work with get totally wrong before you start working with them with regards to their quotas, their CRM structure or dashboards?
That's a good question. Is there one thing that they get totally wrong? I would say yes. I think the way that they don't anchor their territory design process. And what I mean by that is they don't tell the company. The company does not say, here's what we're doing. Here's what a territory is to our business. And derivative of that are a number of problems. You've now got people trying to design territories without a North Star. You've got sales reps complaining about fairness without a clear definition of what fairness is. And then you've got people managing all different sorts of data without sort of clear parameters on what the data are for this exercise so that we can iterate and test on that going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say the biggest mistake that I see companies make is that they are defeated in how they're thinking about territories, because it's always been this kind of like nightmarish thing that they have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they can anchor it with a North Star, which I think is largely due to empowering RevOps to do that, we see that they can have a totally different experience.
Yeah. Well, I think that could be really useful to a lot of people listening. At least definitely something to think about, right? From my understanding, you've been known to say something around the culture of winning. Is that correct?
The culture of winning. You're going to have to prompt me here. I'm sorry. I don't know that I've been saying something around the culture of winning.
Okay. Well, let's just say, if you were to say something like in the culture of winning. So again, when you're thinking about the difference between companies and teams that scale and perform versus those who don't, how does territory design help or hurt them from winning?
How does territory design help them? I think the word is focus in this sense. What I talk about territory design is how you orient to the market. I'm repeating myself here, but that word in a singular word is focus. I now have everyone on my team focused on the market. Focus is not only useful in the sense that everyone is not spending time on bad activities or accounts that don't matter. It's also iterative. If I've aligned on what my focus is, I can then measure it. I can adjust it. And so the winning companies we see, they're not getting things right all the time, but they have a focus, and that focus manifests into additional focuses as they go forward.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, that winning all the time thing, I think is another thing that we learn, often through failure or perception, or poor perception. And again, this is talked about in all kinds of business operating systems where perfection is the enemy of progress and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, as a passionate racket sports player, so tennis being the key of that. So Roger Federer recently, now I guess becoming more famous, commencement speech where he asked all the newly graduated students like what percentage of the points in his career he won. And they were all shocked when he said it was like 53%, right?
Yeah.
again, all he had to do was win, a few more points than the next person, and that was enough to win. Which I thought was a really, and it's a really good mindset, and it also reminds me a little bit of an engineering mindset, where engineering takes the approach of failure is learning. So
Yeah.
you got to try, fail, and eventually you get a better product. Yeah, I think we have a distorted picture of what winning actually looks like, and I think it's the baseball analogy, of course, is at bats, right?
Yeah.
I'm probably talking to myself here more than anyone else, but
No, not at all. I had my kids watch that Roger Federer speech. I'm a big tennis fan
oh, cool.
as well. It's such a beautiful adage and incredibly humbling that someone who not only has won to such a degree but has done so elegantly. 53%, like, it's very tangible, right? We're in a startup, and so there's many days where you wonder if what you're doing is winning at all,
right?
Because the results don't come quick. But if you can remember that, I mean, there's a saying in Buddhism that I like, is no mud, no lotus. And it's right. You have to be in it, and you have to go, and you have to keep pushing, and eventually there will be a flower.
Yes. No, I love that. I love that one. And it probably comes back to the mindset that you were referring to earlier around reps being in the right, like, if they're in the mindset of like grind and unfairness and whatever, I mean, that is like, I mean, no one's going to survive that, right? You have to play the long game, I guess, is where I'm going with this. Is so if you have that mindset that if I keep doing these things, eventually I'm going to get to where I'm going, or you'll learn along the way that in fact maybe this isn't where you want to go, in which case you find somewhere else where you can have that kind of North Star. Because I mean, any kind of success is going to take a lot of hard work, so it's a lot better when that hard work is meaningful to you, because that's what's going to keep you going, right?
Absolutely. I mean, trust is so paramount. I think everyone who's listening has had a job that they maybe just didn't feel like they were a fit in, or something above them was giving them a feeling like, I don't know. And once you have one foot out, your work becomes far less good. But if you can get people in, and you can show them how much you're trying to put them in a position for a success, it has major ripple effects.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Kevin, so as we start wrapping up here, we're now into the second half of 2025. There's a lot going on, whether you're the leader of a business anywhere in the world, but let's just keep it to North America for now. And then we have a lot of macroeconomic and political challenges, which impacts us as leaders, because not only because it impacts us personally and directly, but because it's also impacting our team, our employees, right?
Yeah.
Uncertainty is always a really hard thing for anyone to deal with. And this is where leadership really starts to make a big difference. But with all that aside, knowing where we are, and for the folks out there who are listening, who have teams of 30, 40, 50, 100, or 500 sales people in their teams, what advice do you have for them as they sort of look at finishing 2025 strong and really setting themselves up for success in 2026?
Yeah, it's a great question. As it relates to the bigger picture stuff, I think it's always a balance between taking in as much as is helpful for you to understand and know, but also balancing out with the fact that you can't control a lot of it. And so, what can you control is how you're orienting your team, how you're running your show as a leader. And so, a technical pulse check on territories is, are my sales reps oriented to the right accounts for a lot of the time? That's like a very kind of tactical one. But there's also the layer of AI fitting into this, which is more within grasp of everyone. And it's, are folks experimenting enough? Are folks feeling scared of this? Are we getting anything out of this yet? And so I think culturally, it's a big time for leaders to say, like, there's a lot happening outside of here. We have our goal that we need to meet. We've got access to new tools, which is a good thing. And so we gotta ride the wave, so to speak. Here, it's a little bit of a time where we need to risk, but trust, and go forward.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and I would agree. I don't see how anyone right now wouldn't agree that you have to just focus on what you can control and try not to listen to too much of the other noise, which you cannot control. So I think that's really good advice. And I think you could probably, you were being more specific, and I think that's really helpful, because we can use, I think any team doing any function in any business right now could really probably do with a reminder about what you just said. So I'll make sure to share that at least with as many people as I can. That's one of the benefits of these kinds of conversations, is because they're happening in real time. And I think a lot of us just need to be reminded of these eternal truths, as it were, right? Which it becomes more and more important as the more of this noise that you cannot control enters your world, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kevin, anything else that you'd like to share as kind of a bonus tip?
A bonus tip, I think the only other thing is most of the companies we meet, they get really frustrated when they are asked about their data, specifically their first party and third party customer and market data. So they tend to throw their hands up in the air and say, yeah, our data is dirty, it's unreliable, and it's not an asset to us. And I would just say that we have now officially seen this as one of the ways that AI can help companies in a very cost-effective way. This is part of the problem related to data. And so if you've ever been a data minimalist in terms of how it fits into your sales team, I would give you the challenge to go and start reading some Substacks that are coming out on how to change that. And I can recommend a few in the show notes, but I think that time is here.
I think that is really good advice. We do typically, talk a lot about data and tech being either an asset or a liability. And I know that you think about things that way too. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And I'm sure the folks listening do too, because we're seeing this all the time, that the sort of parallel, as we've been doing, these CRM implementations, for the last nine years, what we've seen now, the parallels between essentially adopting, between the parallel between adopting a CRM and adopting AI, it's like the same thing as adopting any technology in the past. There are the same things that you need to think about and do. And I think the data readiness component is absolutely critical if you want AI to work for you. But again, I think a lot of what we talked about, which is, I don't think is ironic at all, what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes is essentially going back to the things that are problems that you need to solve in your business, just asking that additional question of like how AI could help you solve those better or faster than you could, without AI.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. So that's really good bonus tip. Kevin, thanks again so much for joining me today. It was really good to connect, and I look forward to learning more about BoogieBoard.
Brendon, thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to RevOps Champions. If today's episode gave you a new idea for scaling smarter or helped you see your team, processes, or tech in a new light, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next insight. And if it hit home, share it with a colleague. Let's grow this community for forward-thinking leaders together.